Welcome to Doghouse Times, Reno My Doghouse, Episode 3. And in this episode, we are going to make a custom strip curtain door for Kiki's doghouse. So you can see here she is wandering around outside on the patio. It's cold, it's windy, and it's not a fun day to be outside. So I'm just going to go take you over to the doghouse here. So I keep the doghouse here beside my hot tub because the dog likes to come out and hang out with us when we're in the hot tub, but she never realizes that it's cold and miserable. She only figures that out after a few minutes, so she likes to go in her little doghouse here. There she is, by my feet. But we want to put a little door on here so that we can prevent some of the wind and rain and snow and stuff from getting inside and getting that carpet wet. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to get some measurements. So I've got my handy measuring tape here. I'm just going to get some measurements. So first I want the width. So I can see now my door is 6.5 inches wide. And the doorway is 10 inches tall. So it's 6 inches wide, 10 inches tall. And I can have a little bit of overhang because it's raised off the ground. So 6 inches wide, 10 inches tall, that's my doorway. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your measuring tape, you're going to measure your doghouse doorway first, and make sure you get the width and the height. What we're going to be doing today is making a custom strip curtain doorway for the doghouse to help prevent the wind and rain from getting in. It's going to keep it nice and warm, and it's going to allow the dog to go in and out of the doorway freely. Now what we've got here is several different things that you can use. You can use this weather strip. This was actually a bit of extra weather strip from my garage door that I picked up some years ago, and just had this piece lying around. This will actually work perfectly, and this is what I'm likely going to use. It's got this vinyl flap which will kind of act as a drip edge over the doorway. But what you can also do, and what I was thinking of doing, was taking this piece of wood and using that piece of wood and then using this little quarter bead on top of it and painting it with varathane so it's nice and waterproof. And we're going to put that up top. We could use that too. So we've got a couple different options of things that we can use. What you're going to need is a piece like this. When we measured the door, it's got to be a couple inches bigger than the doorway. You're also going to need a drill, 3 screws, maybe 4 screws depending on the size of the door, just to make it fastened properly. I prefer using a square for this, a fine point marker, measuring tape, good pair of scissors. Now the trick is I picked up this stuff actually for doing some lining by the front door and stuff to keep the boots from wrecking the floor with the salt and stuff like that. You can also use these for stairs. I think this is actually a stair liner. It's got these perforations in it. But this stuff, this is going to work perfectly. So what we're going to do is, and you can pick this up at any hardware store, or most hardware stores anyway. What we're going to do is, we know that the doorway is 10 inches tall, and we know that it's about 6.5 wide. So we're going to go extra width, and I've already cut these to 10 inches. So these are going to be wider. Even though the doorway is 6.5, we want some overlap on either side. So I've already cut these to 10 inches, which will be perfect. So what we need to do is we need to have 2 pieces of this stuff, of this vinyl. In this case, it's either vinyl or PVC, I can't remember, but cold temperature PVC stuff works the best, but that stuff's a little tricky to find. This stuff's a lot easier to find, and like I said, I just picked this up at the hardware store. what we're going to do is, I like this little skirt on the bottom here. I want to keep that. So what I'm going to do is I need 2 pieces that are going to be 10 by 10. Okay? But I'm actually going to let it hang down a little bit longer. The doorway is 10 high. So we're going to go 11 inches high and we're going to go 10 inches wide for this particular doorway. So what I'm going to do here is, this isn't a straight cut. I can see it rips down to the perforation. So I'm going to go from this perforation point, which right here on my clear mat, and I'm going to go 10 inches wide. So that'll bring me to right here on my mat. And this one's got lines in it, and I like to get ones with the lines because it makes it a lot easier to try to cut, because you can just follow the line that already exists on the mat. See, it doesn't mark great, but we don't want marker all over it either. So I'm just going to start by cutting this piece out at the width that I want it. Now remember, my width of my doorway is 6.5 inches, but I've decided to go a little bit wider because I want the overlap over either side of the doorway. Okay? So I'm just using the punched, we'll say. It's sort of like a design that's right in the mat itself already. I'm just using that as my guideline to cut nice and straight along that line. And I'm going to cut all the way across, just like that, because I don't need this piece. This is extra that I'll probably use for my stairs or something at a later date. Okay, now I know that this perforation line is where I was going on this side, so I'm just going to trim along this perforation line to give it a nice, clean, straight cut along this side. Now you might want to remember, if your dog has not used a doghouse with a strip curtain before, you're going to have to teach your dog how it works. Now some dogs pick it up really quick and some dogs don't, but I recommend making sure you've got at least a handful of treats and give yourself about 20 minutes. You have to be patient with dogs, okay? It's the best way to train them is patience and repetition. So what you're going to do is you're going to get your treats. Once you've got your doorway installed, you're going to bring it out, bring your dog out, and using treats, you're going to coax them through the doorway repeatedly, back and forth, and give them a treat each time they go into the doghouse using the doorway. That way they know they can just push through it and they'll get a treat. Okay, so like I said, I want this to hang underneath. Now keep in mind, so my doorway's 10 inches tall. I'm going to need a little bit that I want hanging underneath the doorway because the whole house is actually elevated. But I also need a little bit to go underneath our mounting piece, which is going to go at the top and fasten to the doghouse. So I need to have an extra bit of width. So in this case, I know I'm going to be using this, but maybe you're using wood, so just use it the width that you have. So I know that I want that little extra, and then 10 inches to the height of my doghouse. So on here, that brings me to the 11-inch mark, so I'm just going to move that over right there. So that's right there. And then you're going to measure the extra for whatever it is that you're using to mount it. So in this case, I'm using this. This is 2 inches, so I'm going 2 inches extra. So that puts me to this point right here. Now, I'm just going to double check that this is actually long enough to do 2 pieces. So I have 13 inches to that, and there I've got 13 3/4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the difference in this case. So I've got, it's actually 26 7/8 is what my mat is. And I need about 13. So 13 and 13 would be 26. So 13 and a half would be 27. And that's about where we're at. So we're going to go about 13 and a half. So I'm just going to move that over a little bit. And this is going to be real easy. So all I need to do is take this and fold that over. And this just happens to work. Yours may not work so easily with regards to the height. It depends on the height of the door, and it depends on the width of the mat that you wind up getting, or the cold weather vinyl, or whatever the case is. It kind of depends upon that, right? So, just going to make my mark here. And now, I'm going to just cut this across. Like so. So there, I've got my two pieces. Now go with the curve on this. You see the curve? It wants to curve like that, right? So what I want to do is I want to put that towards the doghouse. So I'm going to put that curve like that. And then on this side, I'm going to put it the opposite. So they're actually going to kind of smush into each other, which will be perfect. Now, okay, so I've got my two pieces that I've cut out, and these are the right size. So you see how the curve, again, the curve of the mat, what I want them to do is curve towards each other. Okay, so you see how that one curves like that, and then this one curves like this, and I'm going to place them on top of each other like that. Now this has a little flapper thing, so I'm going to have that at the bottom. I'm going to mount them like this. Now, I have to cut them into strips. So, what I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm not going to cut the top parts. I'm just actually going to grab another marker. I got one here, actually. Oops. Oh, here we go. A little better marker. I'd like to use a fine point, but this one just doesn't work great. So, I know that my doorway is 6.5 inches, so the first thing I'm going to do is just quickly mark my center. So it's 10 inches wide, but I'm only going to mark it on one of them. Okay, so my center is right here. It's going to be hard to see on the film, but I'm marking that at the halfway point. Now I know that my door is 6.5 inches wide, so I'm going to divide that in half. So that'd be 3.25. So I'm going to take that 3.25 and I'm going to just place the mark there. And I'm making a mark at 6.5, and then I'm making a mark at 0 with the 3.25 at the halfway point. And what this is going to do is this is going to tell me where my doorway actually is. So this shows me how many strips I want to have. So I want to have one strip that's going to open to the doorway itself, and then I want to have one strip that's going to overlap a little bit. And now I want to make this easy for my dog, so I'm going to cut this back one on these marks, and this is 3.25, so I'm going to cut it at let's divide it by 2. So we're going to go at 1.5 plus 1/8. So it's 1 5/8 on this one. And just divide it by 2. So I know that's 1 5/8 over here. So I'm going to cut that there. Now, I know that my doorway is going to be 10 inches high, but I know I gave this extra little flap to go below the doorway. So I'm going to bring this to right here. I'm just going to make a mark right there. Then I'm going to take my square. I'm just going to make the top sort of line. You know what, I'm going to use this bigger marker. Maybe you can see that. So there's my top line there. Okay. So that's the line I don't want to cut past. Now, I have to make several cuts in this bottom one. And again, I'm going to use the lines that are printed into this rubber, vinyl, PVC, whatever this particular stuff is. I'm going to use that to kind of guide me so that I don't have to make big ugly marks across. I'm just cutting the strips out of it. I shouldn't say out of it. I'm not removing the strips per se. It's kind of tricky to see. You gotta hold it. This stuff you have to hold at the right angle in order to see that you're cutting straight. And it's a little thick, so it's a little tricky to work with. But we're almost there. Now you can pre-mark these if you really want with a marker or something, but as you can see here, the marker kind of doesn't stay well on it, and it kind of bled out a little bit as I moved the ruler off, or the square I should say. So I'm not a big fan of covering this stuff in marker. Now, there is my first layer, but to make this work properly, I've got to have 2 layers. So, the next one, I'm going to put this on top of this, and this next one we're going to mark out halfway along each one of these. And I'm just using the fine marker for this one, because like I said, I don't want a lot of big marker mess all over the place. Now, if you're handy with a knife, you can use a straight edge and just do quick zips along there, so to speak, with your knife. But if you want to be a little safer, use your scissors. I'm playing it safe today, using the scissors instead of the knife. But you can very easily use a knife to cut this stuff. Cuts real simple. So as you can see, it's no big deal to cut it. It is a little deceiving with the glare. Well, you know what I didn't do? I didn't mark my top line. So I want to do that. So I'm just going to put a few dots along it. It should be pretty good to eyeball it. And I'm just going to keep, be patient, do a decent job. It'll look better. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm saving myself a bunch of money by making this myself. And it's going to be exactly the right size. And that was the thing I found. I found a few online that, you can go ahead and buy. And some places offer, a certain size or whatever. But I found that just making my own custom doghouse door is the easiest way to do it. If you really like the doghouse door that I'm making, I will put a link in somewhere. I might, maybe, start making custom doors for you. It'll be offered on Doghouse Times, but we'll see. We'll see if I'll do that. Custom size for your doghouse. So, as you can see, I'm just cutting along the lines here. Trying to cut straight. It's a little tricky with the glare. I think I kind of went off on that one a little bit, but that's alright. It's not the end of the world if you don't get it perfectly straight, but it will look nicer if it is straight. So here we go. I've got these cut out. So there's my second one. There's my first one. Now, the way that that's going to work is when these go together, because I cut them at different points, there's kind of an overlap. So you see here, if I take two away, you can see there's an overlap there, that each one overlaps the one before it. And that's what gives us our seal. So it's got a nice seal, but you can easily push your way through. And then when we install this onto the doghouse, I'm going to install it by just taking this. See, this is why I really like using this weather strip. This is garage door weather strip that was left over from when I installed my garage. But look how nice that looks. First of all, it's vinyl. So that works really nicely. It's got this little edge to act as a drip edge. And look at that. It looks real nice. So the only catch now, I'm going to actually use this wood as a backer because I need to drill 3 holes. And I need it to go all the way through. But I want to mark it out because I want it to look nice. So this is 10 inches wide. So I'm going to go down the middle. I'm going to do 1 inch and 1 inch and one right in the middle at 5 inch. So there's my 3 marks. Make sure I've got my flaps lined up. I'm going to put this piece right like so. I'm just going to drill through. Careful not to drill myself there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put these screws in so that they're just sticking out the back, you know, maybe like an 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go outside to the doghouse and I'm going to sort of what I like to call dummy mount. And I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to put this onto the doghouse and I'm just going to pre-drill the holes onto the doghouse itself. Let's see, I've put this in too far. I don't want it to actually screw into the wood. See? So now that goes out the back. Like so. Now it's time to go install it. Okay, so what I've done here, I used my drill, a pair of scissors, Robertson screwdriver, fine point marker. I'm going to use, I use 3 wood screws, they're actually deck screws, 2 layers of this vinyl. It's actually meant for lining stairs, but it worked out really nicely for this purpose. And I cut that into the strips. I cut this to size, drilled the holes through it. You see I've pre-pushed the screws through so they stick out a little bit, and I'm going to go mount that onto the onto the doorway of the doghouse, making sure that I pre-drill first so that I don't split the wood. Okay, so what we're going to do here, I've got my door. As you can see from the rain dripping on me, it's a perfect day to get this door on here. So I'm just going to take this like so, and I've got the screws sticking out the back, so they're going to make little marks. And just line that up where I want it, make sure it's nice and center. I'm going to install that right there. So I'm just going to push it in a little bit to make the marks with the screws. Okay, so I pre-drilled my holes so I won't split the wood. Lining up the screws. I'm going to turn them back a little bit so I can push it hard against the wood to get a nice seal. Now when it dries out a little bit out here, I am going to put a nice bead of silicone along the top edge. What that's going to do is help seal it so nothing can get in here. But putting this on nice and tight is going to help prevent stuff getting in behind because of the strip curtain that I've got in behind my vinyl weather strip. There we go, nice and tight. And there's our doorway. One vinyl strip curtain doorway for our doghouse. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notify button, and stay tuned for the next episode. Come on. Good girl, come on. Perfect.